Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Gender and Development. It comes under Development Studies. This is going to be the third or the fourth in the series. But today's topic is gender parity in education. Gender parity in education. So, what are we going to learn? We're going to be understanding what are some of the barriers of girls' education or girl and women education. Then, what are under that, we'll be looking at what's learning poverty, we'll be looking at culture, we'll be looking at poor infrastructure, we'll be looking at violence, fragility, and conflict. Then we'll be looking at forced marriages for in the case of gender. We'll end up with what sort of interventions there are. Actually, they are by World Bank group. So those are the areas we'll be looking at predominantly. So then let's just zoom straight into action. Today is the 13th of November 2023, and the topic is gender parity in education. Generally there is some sort of parity between boys and girls in schools enrollment at the primary level, but when it starts getting to the secondary level, into the tertiary level, the dynamics changes. The dynamics changes gradually. So it requires that we look at it in favor of the gender that is not the mainstream. Mainstream means male. Mainstream gender is male. So the female, and that's the girls and young women, the education is what we're going to look at. We have to understand that there's poverty in these areas for women. In fact, specifically we're talking of learning poverty. Apparently, let's take note, United Nations and especially World Bank has placed a lot of emphasis on girls and young women education, There's a lot of emphasis, and World Bank has raised enough funds with its partner institutions to promote, sustain, and retain girls in school and young women in school. So we go through it. When it comes to learning poverty, actually occurs in a lot of low-income countries. When it comes to learning poverty, which is one of the barriers, the first barrier we'll be looking at, learning poverty actually is what? It is the inability of a child not acquiring the necessary skills and knowledge to go through life or society fully, meaning that the inability to understand or be able to exhibit literacy and numeracy when needed in life, that is a learning poverty. And so you would have observed, or if you go online, you find out that in sub-Saharan Africa or in Africa generally, Mali has as high a rate as 91% in learning poverty. Mali has a high rate in learning poverty, 91%, which is quite serious because the school dropout rate is also high. So we're going to be looking at things like that, school dropout rate, and then how retention is done in schools. Besides that, then thereafter we have Ghana, that is going through a learning poverty of 80%, meaning that the primary school graduates do not have the literacy and numeracy skills enough to function fully in society. So what happens after they drop out of primary school? That's also another issue. I'm not saying that's the reason why a lot of dog chain sellers or those who are hawking on high street, traffic prone high street, that's where they are. No, that's not what I'm saying. But there's learning poverty in Ghana, and Ghana has to look at it carefully. Nigeria has about 70% learning poverty, and they also look at it in two forms. That's the school dropout, just like Mali. Okay, so if these countries I've mentioned and other countries are in this category, we need to look at it case by case, and the governments or the educational authorities must look at it in conjunction with policymakers and come up with more pragmatic ways. Not necessarily only the IMF, not necessarily only the World Bank group approach. That is one, but country-specific approach is also necessary for development studies. So let's look at learning poverty. We've just talked about learning poverty. It is as high in Mali, and it's even worse in Afghanistan, where the Taliban government has ensured that after the sixth grade, no girl should proceed further into learning. They have pulled out all the females in the university that they shouldn't be there because of religious reasons or cultural reasons. If that be the case, it presupposes that learning poverty, as we've seen, has got another dimension, which is what? Culture. Our cultures has an implication. If our cultures has an implication, then it's important because it could be patrilineal, it could be matrilineal, or it could be patrilocal or matrilocal. When it's patrilocal, it means that they inherit through the paternal way. So um, kinship production becomes the option, and so men must be working and dictating and leading the family, meaning that the men are those who inherit. And if you have to choose between a male or a boy and a girl going to school, the family will opt for the boy going to school and leave the girl, because to some Islamic folks, girls are meant to be in the house or the grave. They have only two places, either in the house or in the grave, and that is serious. And that's a cultural issue and religious issue. Being religious, it becomes a bit more controversial because I mentioned Afghanistan. It's not only Afghanistan, Southeast Asia, and then we have the Middle East, and then Northern Africa. Northern part of Africa has this Islamic religion, and so they have this problem with women being in school. However, there's been changes in some countries, so they are catching up. In some other African countries, because of their patrilineal approach and because of the poverty in the house, they tend to share the resources such that they place emphasis on the boys going to school and leaving the girls to work in the house and keep the home domestic at no pay. They are not paid for anything they do in the house, and they are more domestic workers, but unpaid domestic workers, and that is limiting the girl child's or the girl or the young lady's abilities and potentials. Meanwhile, it is a human right. World Bank is saying that in their emphasis on girls and women education, quality education must be delivered. For them, quality education is what they want. And when it comes to quality education, they are talking of what? Holistic education. Education that is holistic and not just an assessment. It's life skills to be acquired, and they must be taught life skills completely so that they come out complete economically, socially, mentally, cognitively, and emotionally complete for life. And that's what the emphasis is on. So World Bank has got this kind of definition in terms of quality education. When you move there, we'll see another factor, that is poor infrastructure. Poor infrastructure is also another inhibitor or barrier to girls and women education. You'll be seen on the screen. Some communities, especially in the rural part of Africa and then Asia, they would have to trek for about 30 minutes. Some have to cross the river and trek in addition before they get to school and back, maybe for about 40 minutes or an hour in, and then 40 minutes, an hour back to the home. And that is also a challenge. And it comes with some vagaries, with over 30 to 60 million young girls and young women being abused, sexually harassed in the process in between their home and school whilst they are trekking. That happens, and that is one thing that we have to be mindful of. Is there a way to stop that? Let's take a break here. Welcome back to gender parity in education. We're talking of trekking, young girls and young ladies trekking from home to school, and the distance tend to be quite difficult for some of them because of poor infrastructure. The vehicles are not there, so they will have to trek. Some would have to cross the river, use a boat to cross the river and back, and it's also a problem. That's notwithstanding, there are other issues like it comes with sexual harassment for the girls and then the young ladies. The other bit is forced marriage. People are betrothed, young ladies are betrothed before the age of 16, and when they are betrothed, it's difficult for them. I mean, they don't continue school, they're emotional, they go through emotional stress, and then they would have to drop out of school. So out of school dropout rate is also attributed to forced marriage in itself, and that is problematic. We have to look at it. So country specifics must be looking at it. Various countries must be looking at what's their cultural connotation, what kind of marriage system do they have. Do they have forced marriage? Then they should abolish that forced marriage as a law and make sure that the cultural practice that forces marriage is seized and stopped, or seized or stopped specifically, so that we get the full potential of women working and the world grows at a faster rate. Because as of now, about 50% of the world is not growing. Only 50%, which is the mainstream. That's men are the only ones working and generating the income. The other 50, part of them are working and generating income, but the rest are not. And even those that are working, we are not sure if there's full potential of what they are doing in labor. Okay, so the labor force itself we having in the world and its productivity is what? Questionable, is below expectation or below anticipated volumes. All right, so World Bank is emphasizing on quality education. If you look at enrollment globally, there's an equal parity, but then it says no, look, there's a problem. Yeah, there's a problem. When you look at enrollment of boys and girls in primary school in low-income countries, the enrollment is about the same. 90% of boys get enrolled, 89% of girls get enrolled in primary schools in low-income countries. However, the data is also showing that, look, when you look at low-income countries and the completion rate, when they complete primary school, you notice that the boys, 67 of them complete, 67% of them complete, and the girls, only 63% complete. That is 4% difference. The 4% may not be significant, but it's worth watching. Okay, when you look still at low-income countries and you look at the lower secondary, the completion rate for boys is 44%, and then it drops to 36% for girls. You can appreciate it now that it's quite more than 5% difference. But even that, within group is between the group of boys and girls, the dropout is quite high. It is about 8%. Then within the same group, between boys and boys, from primary to secondary and lower secondary, and then from girls from primary to lower secondary, girls from primary to lower secondary, 63%. Now it's dropped to what? 36%. That is too wide. It's too wide a gap. So it means the school dropout, out of school girls are happening. Then what about upper secondary? Those who complete upper secondary, 26% globally in the low income countries. Only 26% complete. So there's all the way from 67% at the end of upper secondary, only 26% complete. And upper secondary could be senior high schools. Senior high schools, only 26% complete. And then the ladies, only 21% complete. And that is not worth it. No, there's something. We are wasting human resources. We are losing labor. We are losing productivity. And it has to be looked at to, because that leads to what? Learning poverty that we talked about. That World Bank is more interested in quality education. And when it comes to quality education, they are looking at what? Holistic education for boys and girls, for girls and boys, such that it should be life skills. The knowledge and the skills must combine, giving them all that is necessary for life, and not just an assessment kind of thing, the examination, pencil and paper examination. No. Okay, it goes on. We look at let's look at fragility, violence, fragility, conflict and violence, FCV, they normally call it short form. When it comes to fragility and conflict, you would observe that in conflict countries with conflicts, the girls are the first casualties. They don't have to go to school, and if they go, they are thrown out, because that is not their place during conflict. They will be killed or abused in any form. So when it comes to FCV, women or young girls rather, and young women are the major casualties to that. So it impedes on their education. It impedes big time on their education, big time, and that has to change. We cannot stop conflicts, but we can minimize conflicts. That notwithstanding, we have to look at other areas. What about the tertiary education? So far we've dealt with secondary education. In tertiary education, globally it's been observed that the enrollment favors young women. It favors ladies more than men. It means that there are a lot of women entering the universities and polytechnics and other tertiary institutions than there are boys or men entering, which is good. But then it presupposes that there is a problem over the tertiary education, that also country specific must look at their numbers of enrollment and try to scale with such that there's parity. And that's what World Bank is more interested in. Based on that, we have to find out what are some of the interventions that World Bank is coming up with. World Bank has got various interventions that we'll have to look at. They have categorized it into 4. So let's take a break and then we come back to that. Yes, okay, we're back. We talked about what are the interventions or how do we remove the barriers. And we observed that when it comes to the barriers, you tell that World Bank Group, WBG, we normally use abbreviate it, have 4 categories. The first category has got to do with how do they support, what kind of support system to remove the barriers. The first category has got to do with scholarship schemes and financial supports. They have one where they give stipends to girls and young ladies who complete secondary school in Bangladesh and Pakistan. They give them stipends actually and scholarships to go through secondary education complete. Okay, then the second one has got to do not okay, besides that stipends, we have another one, AI empowerment for girls in Angola. Okay, then we have, and that AI empowerment for girls in Angola, it comes with a financial incentives for girls to embark on AI training. Then we have Agile in Nigeria. That's Agile is Adolescent Girls Initiative for Learning and Empowerment in Nigeria. That itself is for Nigeria, and they give them money. They give them real cash. They transfer it on their mobile phone, their parents' mobile phones for the girls, and the girls themselves, the young ladies themselves, they transfer it onto their phones. They give them money. World Bank gives them cash through their mobile phone so that they can get to school and complete secondary school. That's an empowerment for women. And we'll look at empowerment, that is enabling someone to take initiative, or the person take the initiative. You enable the person to continue and retain and complete that initiative and achieve what he or she says to do, and then become independent without necessarily being guided or being instructed to follow. That's the empowerment we're talking about. There is another stage, which is the MIQRA. Mali, I talked about Mali with 91% of learning poverty. So Mali, they have the MIQRA, which is Mali Improving Education Quality and Results for All Projects. That's the MIQRA for Mali. Here, they give them food and teach them the appropriate nutrition such that they go to school and maintain attendance and retain the process, the learning process to completing secondary schools. And that is the MIQRA, and funded by the World Bank. World Bank is also, the second project goes as improving safety. You know, we talked about the safety of girls and then young ladies commuting from home to school and back. And so that itself is important because it comes with inclusion. That safety itself is important. It comes with inclusion. And here we're talking of Tanzania. World Bank is providing a training for counselors in life skills. Counselors are being trained and paid by World Bank to teach girls and young ladies life skills. That is what they are looking at as quality education. Let's be mindful, quality education. That's what World Bank is looking at. Then at the same time in Nigeria, they are sponsoring the same counselors in life skills training to train about 340,000 girls and young ladies. And that's what they are doing. Okay. The third bit is improving the quality of education for girls. World Bank has various projects going on for girls and then boys. In Ghana, for an instance, I earlier mentioned that Ghana has 80% learning poverty. If that be the case, then in Ghana, what project is World Bank coming up with? A lot of the young people, when they finish primary school in Ghana, just cannot read and write. And that is problematic. And Ghana government has to look at it. World Bank is playing its role, but is that enough? Okay, so they have accountability and learning outcome project. They call A-Loop. And over there, they are training the teachers to be sensitive towards gender. They are training teachers to be sensitive towards gender, and that is how they improve quality of education for girls and then for boys. In Honduras, they're looking at the early childhood education where gender sensitivity on the part of the teachers or the learning deliverers in the classroom. So they are rewriting the curricula for Honduras to ensure that there is gender sensitivity part of it. Then Sao Tome and Principe, girls empowerment in quality education for all is also there. And that goes to do with what? Also life skills. Counselors are being trained and paid by World Bank to ensure that girls are given the appropriate life skills for survival in the world, not just tests, exams, assessment, pencil and paper assessment, or pen and pencil, or they call biro and paper as kind of assessment. No. Okay. The fourth is developing skills for life for young women. You know, so far we've been talking about primary to secondary school. What about tertiary? In Nepal, World Bank has a project we call Nurturing Excellence in Higher Education Project. And that is about scholarship, especially into the university, and then on STEM, science and technology projects, STEM projects. How will they learn STEM? And then they have to increase, women have to be increased in STEM training. All right, they have assets. Assets is in Bangladesh. It's also another project in Bangladesh. That's accelerating and strengthening skills for an economic transformation project. Bangladesh and then Pakistan. Pakistan has this STEM project also for tertiary education. That is mature level. That's the young ladies and then women in particular, young women. Okay, we have other higher education projects that are going around by World Bank, World Bank Group, and it's being funded. They are all being funded. All these are being funded projects. They support masters and PhD programs in Africa under what they call the African Centers of Excellence. ACE, African Center of Excellence, ACE, ACE. They do sponsor. Those are ways of removing the barriers of girls and women education in the world, especially in the low-income countries in the world. The name is Kwame Afaglu. Thank you.